sometimes just bringing money is enough, right? And get out of the way and let the other person go about it. But that needs to be defined, because what happens if the handshake agreement was, I'm just going to bring you money and you're going to go build a business, and then 6 months in, the money person is like, I want to start exerting some control over how you do things.
The following program features a bunch of doofuses talking about the automotive aftermarket. The stuff we or our guests may say do not necessarily reflect the beliefs of our peers, our sponsors, or any other associations we may have. There may be some spicy language in this show, so if you get your feelings hurt easily, you should probably just move along. So without further ado, here's your host, Mike Allen, with Confessions of a Shop Owner, presented by TechMetric, the best software in the history of ever.
Good morning from sunny Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where it is brisk, but at least it's not raining anymore. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Mike. Just glad to see you. Can you see what's in the background, by the way?
I see your bronze trophy from the go-karting. I'm super proud of you. Wait, no, you just zoomed in. There it is. Oh, you've learned out how to use the hand signals for nice.
Oh yeah,
fancy. Well, if you put the right filters on your camera, you might be able to make it look gold. I'll send you a picture of mine, and you can sample to get the filter right.
I almost typed my name in today for our meeting as Senior Trace.
I'll tell you, I entered an adult go-kart league competition at my local track, and the first several weeks of competition was for points, and then they've got different groups that are all running, and then this week was you line up on the grid according to points. And it was a rolling start for the first time, because it had been a standing start for every other week. And the top three finishers in each group moved on to the final next week. And so I was tied for first place in points in my group. And the other guy had the tiebreaker. So I started second in a rolling start. And rolling start's way different than a standing start. And
it is.
I 100% did not know what I was in for. And it was a bunch of good old boys, and they just ran me right the F over. And I did not qualify for the final. I struggled to finish in sixth. It was pretty ugly and humbling. There's different types of racing, and we've established that is not one of the types that I have enough practice at yet. So,
yeah. Well, you'll get there.
Anyway, yeah. Well, as long as I'm willing to dump enough stupid money into it on toy carts that are governed heavily. Anyway.
Well, $100 bill goes a long way to take that governor off.
Yeah, I bet, yeah. Suddenly I've got 50% more horsepower than everybody else on the track.
Yeah. You tip the high school kid $100, and all of a sudden you're a second faster than everybody.
All right. So, today, obviously, I'm not coming to you from my home office like normal. Family and I are out celebrating spring break, so I've got just the AirPods and the laptop. We'll see how that quality goes. We're going to leave it up to producer extraordinaire to filter out all the background noise. So if you have any bad noise on this episode, dear listener, send hate mail to Braxton. That'd be great. Confessions of a Shop Owner at Gmail is his, and he'll be sure to get all the hate mail. But I had some conversations about partnership and some of the pitfalls of partnership and that kind of thing while we were at the Elite Conference earlier this year, and those episodes have been released and have gotten a lot of feedback. And I felt like it was reasonable to kind of stretch that conversation out a little bit from a coaching perspective, because one of the things that was really important to me when I had a partnership was the advice and help that I got from my coach at Elite, Jim Murphy, at the time. And so I just kind of want to go through that process again with you as if we were starting anew. I want to talk about the different types of partnership that we see out there, why a partnership agreement is important, and what are kind of the pieces of a partnership agreement that should be considered, why that's the time to have the conversation, right? But just to recap my take on it, I think, look, most businesses fail right? So it's safe to say that most partnerships fail as well. I'm sure that there are a lot of partnerships out there that have been wonderfully successful, but on the whole, um, partnership is a great way to turn a close working relationship or a friendship into animosity over a long enough period of time, and a lot of stress and that kind of thing. So um, I'm not a huge believer in partnership, but at the same time, I can understand, because I've lived it, that going out on your own is scary, and having somebody alongside you to do that with, it's like a safety blanket, man. It's not nearly as scary if you have somebody that you can talk to every night. It's like a marriage in a very high degree, right? Um, and sometimes you have one person has all the skill set and one person has the money, right? And so that makes a partnership. And the dynamics, the power dynamics in that type of partnership, because there are a lot of them out there, um, can get really tricky as well. So, hey, have you had partnership experience in your life, or has it always been just family business, or what's your experience been?
So I had two partnership LLCs that we created for some pretty much startup concept to sales. So we had an engineer that worked with us at the family business, and we created some side.
All right, I'll be honest. Most shop owners don't have a time problem. We have a can't let go problem. Because if you step away, stuff breaks. Phones ring, comebacks happen, someone calls in sick. You know the drill. But Tectonic 2026 is one of the few things that's actually worth stepping away for. Presented by TechMetric, Tectonic is 3 days in Houston this April, built for owners, advisors, and technicians who want real answers, not just hype. The kind of stuff you don't get from scrolling Facebook at 11 p.m. or listening to another guru tell you to just raise your labor rates like that fixes everything. You'll hear what other shops are changing, what they've stopped doing, and what's actually working right now. If you want to get out of the weeds for a minute and come back with a sharper plan, check it out. Tectonic is happening April 9th through 11th in Houston, Texas. Tickets are on sale now, and my listeners can get $500 off standard pricing with code CONFESSIONS500. Go to techmetric.com/tectonic. That's TEKTONIC, or tap on the link in the show notes for more. Look, here's the deal. I like to think that I'm pretty good at running an auto repair shop. It's what I've done for 20 plus years, but I'm not good at managing a marketing budget and all the different facets of a truly well-rounded marketing plan. There's mail, there's local advertising, there's website, there's Google AdWords, there's all the different things that go into that, and it's just not what I'm good at. So what I've chosen to do is to buy myself the time to focus on what I am good at, while having someone else execute on all of those things at a way higher level than anything I could ever do. That's what turnkey auto marketing does for me. So if you feel like you could use some of that same magic, I'm going to recommend that you go to turnkeyautomarketing.com, get a free consultation, tell them that I sent you, tell them that Confessions of a Shop Owner sent you. You won't be disappointed.
Side businesses to create some products. And, the concept was we would get proof of concept on the design and then sell the design to a larger company. So we were able to do that successfully to completion with one idea, and then the other one died on the vine. But my take on partnerships, and then I've seen Dad go through different partnerships for things that he did in the past, mostly just trying to help people out. They would enter. So I've seen good and bad side of it. My personal belief, and along with my experience in partnerships, is a large reason that a lot of partnerships fail is just like you said. People go into it with either friends or family, and it's a trust agreement with a handshake, and there's not a lot of real conversation that happens prior to about all of the things. And like you said, it really is a lot more like a marriage than anything else. And, successful marriages are built off of good communication on the front end and alignment, right? So if you can like somebody, if you meet them and you guys can get along, from a personality standpoint. But if your goals and visions for your life aren't aligned with each other, the likelihood of success for the partnership or the marriage is going to be lower than 50%, right? If I'm a career driven individual and I got empire building on my mind, and you want to live in a single wide and you're happy living in a single wide, nothing wrong with either one of those paths, but they don't intersect with each other very well.
Correct.
And so, same concept on the professional partnership. And that's, I think a lot of times, like you said, people they have a common dream, but they have a different idea about it. They're not aligned with how that dream is going to come to fruition. And I think a lot of times the dream it looks clear and the same, but if you really sat down and fleshed out the details, they're way apart from what I have a dream of owning a shop. You have a dream of owning a shop. You're a good service advisor. I'm a good technician. We get together, we start a shop, right? But
Yeah.
then when it gets into the actual nitty gritty of how the shop is going to be run and how everything is supposed to go, there's a big variance there, and who's going to put in the work and what that work is going to look like. And that's, typically where we see friction and arguments that pop up. And then nobody wants to have the difficult conversations on the front end of what happens when we have those arguments, right?
I'm here for it, man, because the time to have the hard conversation is when everybody's getting along and when everybody's happy and excited. Because, like you said, so often it's, complementary skills, or one has the skill, one has the money, or whatever, and they're fired up, and this is going to be awesome. We're going to change our lives. Let's go, man. It's like a high five and a handshake and a beer, and let's get to work, right? And this is not just the automotive space. This is all across industries. I think it's probably more prevalent in the trades. But I mean, I know people in lots of different fields that have made the mistake of going into partnerships without a clear understanding of the nature of the partnership and how it's laid out. And, it's one thing if the business fails to launch or it just kind of dies on a vine, like you talked about. But what happens if it turns into a multi-million-dollar business and there's no clearly defined partnership agreement? There's no clearly defined structure of, shareholder equity. I mean, and then when you're talking about millions of dollars, then the conversation's way more awkward, right? So, I think if you're going into business, if you're a technician or a service advisor, we've got some listeners who are from outside of the sector who are just tired of the white collar life and the middle management BS, and they just wanted to go out and buy a trade business. We've got some of those listeners as well. If you're looking to take on a partner to grow that business, you have to have a business operations agreement, a partnership agreement, a buy-sell agreement, all these things in place. Spend the money with an attorney now. And I know that at startup, money is tight and every penny counts. Do not skimp on that.
100%. And both sides need an attorney, right? You can't share an attorney because an attorney has to represent an individual, right? He can't represent both parties. And so that's the other thing that I see is usually one party is the one that gets the attorney and sets up the partnership agreement, and not by anything devious.
No malicious intent. Yeah, no malicious
intent.
No
malicious intent, but the partnership agreement becomes one-sided, right? Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough that our local family attorney just happened to be in our little small town, just happened to be in a phenomenal, a phenomenal attorney. And when I went to go meet with him about our partnership idea, he sat me down and he asked the other individual to leave the room for a second. And he said, Matt, let's have a one-on-one conversation. Let's just see where we're at. And then we'll go from there. And he said, listen, I need to know who I'm representing here. Am I representing you or am I representing him? All right. And he said, if I'm representing you, he said, I can't be both. And he said, my recommendation is if I'm representing you, he gets his own representation. Right.
Yeah.
And so we were able to start that. And so the structure that he laid out for us is what we kind of carried forward, and it worked really well. And the second partnership that we had, there were some issues with it that we had to dissolve the business. Like I said, it died on the vine, but it died on the vine because things were not done per the agreement, and we were able to have an easy break from it, like you talked about. So the structure that he laid out for us is, he said, "Hey, I'm going to represent you. You need to go get your attorney to represent you. We're going to sit in a room together as the group, and we're going to play what if."
If you're like me, you know there's always hidden revenue in missed maintenance sales or overlooked customer concerns. Detect Auto helps auto shops unlock that revenue by analyzing vehicle service histories, pinpointing maintenance recommendations, and equipping advisors to confidently address customer questions. It's easy, it integrates with your existing software, and your team will love it. Check out detectauto.com and see how your shop can stop guessing and start selling better service recommendations today.
And we sat down and went through every single scenario of the business being successful, of things stalling out in the business, how distributions are going to happen, what the buyout, what happens if one partner doesn't meet the obligation, who owns the assets inside of the business. If it is successful, what does the distribution look like, at the time of exit? All of those things, were planned out. And then he would take that to his attorney and do the same thing. And then we agreed on who had the final red line of the agreement.
Yeah. And look, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about going into a partnership, and you're concerned about hurting feelings in this, my attorney and your attorney back and forth, if you're concerned about hurting feelings at this point, you don't need to be in business together anyway.
100%.
Because this is the easiest that your interpersonal conversations will be, is before you're even in business together. So if you and your partner are getting separate attorneys and having back and forth conversations about that type of situation is uncomfortable, then maybe you need to be thinking about whether or not you should be in business with this person at all anyway. So just putting that out there. Before we dig too deep in, I do want to talk about the different types of partnerships, at least the different types of division of ownership that I've seen. The most common handshake agreement is 50-50. And what 50-50 means when it's not clearly defined is nightmare. But it's, we split all the profits. Does that mean that everybody put the exact same amount of money in? Does that mean that everybody puts the exact same amount of time or skill in? I don't know. Especially if you don't have a clearly defined agreement. And then, like you said, who owns the assets of the company if the company goes defunct? Who owns the debts of the company? Do both of you sign on all the notes?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So of the partnership methodologies out there, the one that I think is the most wrought with, possible disaster is 50-50. So I get that out there. 50-50, I think, is a mistake waiting to happen.
Yeah.
What I had...
Go ahead. No, my thing is, I think you're 100% right. There's no decision out there that can be a 50-50 decision, because if there's a 50-50 decision and we disagree on it, there's no outcome to the decision. Somebody has to have 51% to be the decision maker, because some decisions need a decision even if there's disagreement in it. Right. And then the other thing that I think that you brought up there, so the assets of things, again, how many times have we heard, hey, we got a handshake partnership agreement, one of the guys is the technician, he brings all his equipment in and then leaves in the middle of the night with all of the stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? So if we're going to have a 50-50 partnership, then maybe your assets that you bring to the table are your contribution, but that equipment is now owned by the entity and not you as the individual, because I'm bringing cash to the table, you're bringing equipment to the table, and you can't leave at 2:00 in the morning with all of the business assets, that it takes to produce a profit. And just because you get upset about something, right? But we hear it all the time.
Happens constantly, right? And it's like, look, if you're not willing to take all your tools and equipment that you've accumulated and make it business assets, because you don't trust that guy's going to be your partner, and he's bringing $100,000 of operating cash into the business as business assets, and you're bringing $100,000 worth of tools. It's all the company's now, right? And if you're not comfortable with that, maybe you don't need to be a partner with this guy, right? Or gal, right? So these are real things to talk about. Now, what I had, at the advice of my elite coach at the time, was 51.49. And before we went into, this was he was a store manager for me. He said, I'm never going to leave the business unless it's to open my own business. And I obviously didn't want that to happen. I was looking to get my second location at the time, and I was like, hey man, why don't you stay and run store one, and you put in some seed cash, and we'll go open up store number two, and we'll do 51.49 on it, and but understand that means that ultimately final word and decision falls on the 51, and 51 is the boss. Now we're sharing profits almost exactly even, right? There's a 2% variance, right? So when there's distributions, if we take $100 out of the company, 49 of it is yours, right? 51 of it is mine. So
Yep.
There's a very nearly equitable distribution of the spoils, right? But it is not in any way equal in the distribution of authority. So there's a very clear hierarchy, and I think that is a healthier way to go about it. And still, even with that, and with an ironclad partnership agreement and a very clear understanding, we had all the uncomfortable conversations in advance. Still, after 5 years, we just started to rub on each other and had some friction, but it allowed us to get divorced with minimal salt. So
Yeah.
I think it worked. I think it worked okay, and it was a safety blanket for me because I was scared to go out on my own, right? And it helped him get his feet under him and learn how to operate a business a little bit. And now he has a successful business after we split paths. And so it ended up being good for both of us. But I think the intentionality with which we went about it and the clear communication that was involved early on helped establish that. So I believe that if you're going to go into partnership, that's one of the best ways that you can do it. The other thing that I've seen a lot of guys do who are, trying to build larger operations with multiple locations is they'll have a smaller percentage minority partner who is the operating manager or owner of that location. Right? So there might be somebody that has 10, 15, 20 stores, and each store has a 10% owner that's a separate 10% owner, and they run that store, and they're there open to close, and they have that ownership and that buy-in. I'm fascinated by that concept and that methodology, but I'm not familiar with it because I don't firsthand know anyone like intimately enough that we can have these conversations that's done it that way. Do you have any exposure to that, Matt?
So, I mean, the only exposure that I would have to that would be just through the private equity world, because I mean, that is essentially how private equity operates in a lot of cases. Whether that's an internal team member that has some sort of equity stake in the overall entity as a whole. And so the family business that we had that we sold out to private equity, the individual that they put in charge of running that project, he was the operations manager for that arm of the private equity company. And he had an equity stake in each one of the companies that were owned in that side of in that portfolio of the fund. And it was a small percentage, but it was a big enough of a percentage that it was worth it for him to manage it well when it exited, because his return on his time was considerably more than what his salary was to run it at that point in time.
So small
So I've
slice of a
seen it.
very big pie.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And so I've seen it that way, and I do know of people that in our industry that do exactly like you said, that kind of run that same model of giving, whether they're giving a profit share type agreement, to a store manager, or they've actually cut them in as part of the ownership structure. I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to have an episode in the future talking about kind of non-traditional compensation for really important employees. I don't want to say golden handcuffs because it implies something negative almost, but ways to, what is it, phantom stock or profit share, or however, other ways that people have found to uh, really highly reward key employees for high performance and to keep them invested with an ownership mentality in the business, maybe without actually giving shares of the business.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And
think.
I think,
Go ahead.
I mean, what I was going to say is I think that those performance plans can work very well if you have the right type of employee with an owner mindset. Um, I think if you give that type of a plan to an employee that doesn't understand the concepts of the P&L and net profit very well, it's just a bonus, and they don't really understand how they're getting that money, and therefore it doesn't really have the impact that you would intend to have on it. But I mean, if you look at it, almost all of your corporate run food chains work that way to some extent, right? So your store manager runs the P&L of the store, and they meet with corporate, on a monthly basis and have to go over the key areas on the P&L, and they get paid off. They get some sort of a commission off of the net profit of the store, or in some cases the gross profit. But I mean, even at like a Pizza Hut level, down to that. But certainly once you get into like Applebee's and Ruby Tuesdays and those kind of chain stores, they typically run that type of model. And that was one of the other things that I wanted to say. There's a lot of other industries that make partnerships work very successfully. I just think they come into the partnership agreements in a different way, right? They're more, the partnerships are more white collar and strategic than they are, handshake, friend or family. And I think that's the biggest difference in our industry that we see is we come into this with a lot of, naivety. Is that the word? You know,
Trust, trust and
there's
faith
a
in
lot,
our fellow
there's a lot
man.
of trust, and we have a lot of good intentions on the front end. And, you know, we're going to do the handshake and, the blood oath, and everything's going to be fine. And but there's not a lot of strategy put into what the partnership is. But I think partnerships can definitely work. I don't think that there's necessarily a 100% reason to always stay away from it. I think family partnerships are something that should definitely be met with some level of caution, because that's always
Not only do
more
you
difficult.
destroy a business, you also destroy a family. You make Christmas awkward
Yeah,
forever.
that's right.
I do want to
But
back up real quick.
um,
You mentioned that there's not any point in giving one of those types of plans or small equity shares to a key employee if they don't understand how it's structured. They don't know how to read a P&L and L and a balance sheet. Um, and I think that is really important and really often missed. Um, and not everyone is a natural teacher, right? So just because you
yeah,
understand how to read your financials and what knobs to turn to make the numbers move in different directions and that kind of thing doesn't mean that you can impart that knowledge on someone else. One of the things that I've done to good effect is I sent the guy that we were talking about before, who was a manager who became my partner for 5 years, and now my director of operations. I've also sent him, and I'm thinking about sending another one. In 2 months, you've got another one coming up in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the Elite Fly with the Eagles program,
yep,
and it's 3 days, but it's like a complete shop operations crash course boot camp, right? It's now I know they've got financials, they've got marketing, they've got hiring and recruiting, they've got benefits, they've got sales, they've got everything in that, right?
yeah. And so what we've really done, so we've kind of revamped it over the last 2 years.
Okay.
So even Steven that's been there before, it would be completely different, unrecognizable if he came to the one
Oh
in
wow.
Charlotte. Um, but we just hosted one in Los Angeles last month in February, and it was the same group that we hosted to last year, automotive group. They requested that we come back out again. So I would say probably 50% of the people in attendance there were reoccurring from the previous year, revisiting with us. And the feedback that we got was they thought they were going to come and get the same thing that they got last year, and they were just happy to kind of get, you know, revitalized and pepped up and all that kind of stuff. They were like, man, this was completely different. And so really the outline that we have, that we've created now, we tried to, it used to be so much information that it was hard to come back and be actionable with it because you got a small sample size of so much. And it was all really good, but it was really difficult to come back and say, I'm going to do this because I learned this. So what we did was day 2 of Eagles is now we do a complete deep dive into the financials, and it is 8 hours of the financials. So we're doing workshops on the P&L. We're doing a break even workshop where you take your P&L and we sit down and calculate your break even in the class. We determine, we take that information and figure out what your labor pricing strategy should be, and determine what your effective labor rate target should be, what your door rate target should be. We spend a lot of time breaking down the different benchmarks inside of the P&L, much like we've done on the show before. And then we do the same thing with the balance sheet and try to put some time on the balance sheet, and then give some simple KPI structures that they can follow when they go back, that try to help them learn the business math without it being so complicated.
Hey, it's me, Mike's kid. Want to tell us your wild shop stories? Or maybe you just think my dad's totally wrong. Call us at 704-CONFESS and leave a message. You can tell us we're awesome, or you can tell us we're idiots. We're cool either way. That's 704-CONFESS. Just don't make it too weird.
That they feel like they need a CPA, license to be able to get it done. So just some quick rules of thumb, that they can judge the health of the business in different areas. And then day 3 is operational excellence, where we spend some time going over what the core processes of the business should be. How do you write a process? After you write a process, what do you do with it? How do you implement it with the team? And so we do some role plays, where we do a workshop where we ask the team to build out an SOP based off the structure that we've provided, and then we role play the implementation of that. And it really is it's an incredible 3-day course with a tremendous amount of take-home value.
Okay, let me put in a little bit of shameless plug here. It's May 14th through 16th in Charlotte. It's the Fly with the Eagles boot camp. If you go to eliteworldwide.com/events, you can register there. And if you use Confessions 300 as a coupon code, they'll take $300 off the registration price, which is a killer good deal. So Confessions 300, it's eliteworldwide.com/events, and use code Confessions 300 and save a bunch of money. I feel like I'm definitely gonna send Steven, if not Steven plus one, to that. So interested. I wish I could go, but I've got another event I've got to go to in Virginia immediately after that, and Amanda would kill me if I was gone for 5 straight days yet again.
Yep.
So, all right. So I want to dig into what a partnership agreement looks like. What some of the key features of a solid partnership agreement might be, and what what are some of the considerations? You said that you sat down with your attorney and you went through all the what if scenarios. That is super important, to go through all the what ifs. And so, just for example, part of my partnership agreement was, what if one of us dies, right? I don't want to be in business with his grieving widow, and he doesn't want to be in business with my grieving widow if that happens. So what happens to the other person's shares if one of us dies, right? And there are multiple ways to go about that. And that can be discussed. You should discuss that with your business coach. You should discuss that with your attorney. If you don't have a business coach, obviously, you should call Elite. What happens if they get a divorce and he loses assets, or your business partner loses assets to their spouse in the divorce? How does that affect your business potentially? One of the things that was part of our partnership agreement was that our wives signed the partnership agreement waiving all right to any business assets. But what happens if we're single when we start the partnership, and then we get married in the middle of the partnership, and then it falls apart, right? So you have to consider all of those things, and you need to have the answer to those what ifs written out in the partnership agreement that everybody agrees to. So those are just a few of the scenarios.
And you're 100% right. So we played that what if game on three different visits. And I would say we probably had 20 hours wrapped up between those three, conversations, and then the subsequent conversations we had to have after those meetings to come up with the answers. And he gave us survey questionnaires, right? And we had to fill out the survey questionnaires of, how do you see this and how do you see this? And then we would bring it in. So it was essentially an alignment survey, that he had for, here's a scenario. How do you see it? What is your opinion on this scenario? Right. And then, the partner would write out his idea of how that should go, and I would write out mine. And then we had to sit there and talk about it, when we got to the meeting. And he would advise me, and he would advise him to get advice from his attorney and his legal counsel on the ramifications of that for him on his side of the equation. And again, you'll be surprised how much some of those weird what ifs happen. I mean, the same concept of having an employee and all the weird stories that we could tell of having employees over time of, why they ended up exiting the company. There's just, anytime people are involved and more than one person is involved, anything is possible. And like you said, nobody thinks about somebody getting hit by a bus or a plane crash or, like you said, two single people getting together and then they both end up getting married. Now the spouses are intermingled in it, because legally they're 50-50 on their end of things, and that wasn't defined in the agreement, and so on and so forth.
All right. Oh, it's so much warmer in here. Oh, my tootsies were freezing. So, that I think, again, what we were talking about was making sure that you go through the what if scenarios. And if you don't know what all the what if scenarios are, then again, your attorney does. If you have a business attorney, they've gone through this exercise before, and they can feed up those scenarios for you. I like what you talked about having having surveys that both of you fill out separately and then come together and look at how you think it would have worked out, because unspoken expectations and assumptions is one of the biggest things that sinks a partnership. And realizing how far apart what your assumptions were can be really eye-opening for sure. Another one of the scenarios that really needs to be covered or another one of the things that really needs to be covered in a partnership agreement, I think it's reasonable to have job descriptions in there, what the expectations for each person are and what their areas of responsibility are. And especially if you've got, that variable skill scenario where one person is the service advisor, one person is the technician, or one person is bringing all of the job skills and one person is bringing all of the money. Sometimes just bringing money is enough, right? And get out of the way and let the other person go about it. But that needs to be defined, because what happens if the handshake agreement was, I'm just going to bring you money and you're going to go build a business. And then 6 months in, the money person is like, I want to start exerting some control over how you do things. Right.
Yep. If it's going to be that way, what you're talking about there is a financial backer and then a sweat equity backer. Right. And, there needs to be some understanding. If there's somebody with sweat equity involved, how does their equity vest in the company? And that was what we spent a lot of our time on, because that's exactly what our scenario was. Is I was just a guy that wrote a check, and the project had a predetermined budget about how much was supposed to be to design the prototype, and we put in milestones that said I'm only going to it has to get to milestone by this date and time, or else there is no vesting of the rest of the project. So that way, that protects you as the financial backer of saying, I'm not just going to endlessly keep writing money out of my account for something that you as the sweat equity partner aren't delivering on, right? You're constantly missing objectives and deadlines. Then that's not a sound investment for me on a financial backer side. So, making sure that you understand that, if you do have a sweat equity partner, what do they have to produce for their shares to vest, right? Because you can't start off with, if you have a 60-40 partnership and I'm 60% because I'm the money and you're 40% because you're the sweat equity, and on day one, your shares are vested with no proof of concept, right? Mm-hmm. that doesn't work out very well, right? So there should be
sure.
some level of proof that you can deliver on the return that I'm expecting before your shares vest, and that those conversations need to, like I said, they got to be had. And most of the time, I would say 90% of partnerships would never start if they truly sat down and had these conversations.
And that's probably not a bad thing.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So, because most people would say, well, I'm not going to come and work for XYZ for, a, a worker's salary, so to speak, with no
Yeah.
guarantee of, of payout. But when you start a business, there's no guarantee of payout. I try to tell
That's
everybody,
absolutely the reality.
I'm not saying that, and I don't say this with a source of pride because it was my own stupidity as to why it took this long. But I went 3 years when I started my business with no salary. And, so there's no guarantee that just because you start the business, even without a partner, you're going to be successful right out of the gate, right out of the gate. And I
Yeah.
remember people telling me, really successful people that I knew, they're like, look, plan on living very skimpy for 3 years. And I'm like, oh no, we're going to be just fine. And,
You roll, man.
yeah,
That Firestone that I worked out was doing $3 million a year in revenue. I know that they were making at least $1.5 million.
that's right.
Yeah.
And
There you
so,
go.
so you gotta, I think that, just really understanding how both parties vest, again, like you said, what the distribution looks like when it actually does start making money.
Mhm.
Because that's the other thing is most people don't get into a bunch of, well, there's not a lot of arguments in the middle. There's a lot of arguments on the polar ends of it, which are the business is losing money and one person is taking a lion's share of the loss, and there's resentment that the other one is not, right? Or there's the business is wildly successful and one person is taking a lion's share of the benefit of it, and then the other person is resentful, right?
Mhm.
And so
Sure.
both of those sides of the spectrum really need to be fleshed out. What does it look like if the business is not doing well? And if going into it that you're taking all the financial risk on the front end and then sharing some of the reward, you can't be mad about it when that happens,
For sure. So let's talk about buy-sell agreements, right of first offer, right of first refusal, valuation formulas, that kind of thing. I think it's really important that because a lot of times, life changes. I think that there should be in a partnership agreement a number of triggers that enact a buy-sell agreement. If someone is in an accident and is not dead but is incapacitated for 6 months or more, for whatever your time frame is, or for life, or whatever it might be, well, then that enacts the buy-sell agreement, and here's how it's formulated. And your creativity and ability to agree defines how that can be, but it might just be that, what, I'm sick and tired of this business. I'm going to go get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's and have low stress. That same situation, you need to know my partner can't go sell to just anybody because I don't want to be in business with somebody else. So the person who has the right to purchase first is the other shareholder, right? And not just, well, yeah, of course I would offer to sell it to you first. Well, what if you hate each other? I'm going to go sell it to a jerk, right? Or whatever. Right? So that needs to be in writing. And the mechanism by which that is done. How is the notification given? How much time is the other partner allowed to put together the financing to be able to buy the shares from you?
Is there third party arbitration that comes in and sets the value of the company, or are you presetting the value of the company based off of the operating agreement? All of those things. And like you said, you can have different buy sell agreements for different scenarios for the buy sell, right? In other words, there's a voluntary exit. Hey, what if I, as the majority partner, want to push you out? I want to leverage you out. I mean, and you can set
Again,
it
the
up.
time to have that conversation is before you start.
Yeah, but you can set it up in the front end that says, "Hey, I'm going to set this up that says if I do this and I give you XYZ notice, I'm going to buy you out of what your shares are, because I am the majority and I have the right to do that on the front end, right?" You can set it up to where There's a different buy-sell agreement for a divorce, for what happens if bankruptcy, goes down. All of those things can be, if there is misconduct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if one of the individuals is an operating entity, which is how a lot of this works, what happens if if they were an employee and there was a fireable offense, a sexual harassment, inappropriate communication with a customer, they develop some sort of a life habit that doesn't, promote well to their work environment. And as if they were an employee, you would fire them, but now you can't fire them because they're a business partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's call it what it is. If you're going to step away from the shop, it better be worth it, period. Tectonic 2026 is designed for that reality. Role-based sessions, hands-on workshops, and conversations with people who actually understand what it takes to keep a shop profitable and a team sane. And I like that it doesn't pretend we all need the same thing. Owners, advisors, and technicians don't have the same headaches, so you're not wasting time sitting through sessions that don't apply to your day-to-day life. You should leave with a clearer idea of what to fix first, what to tighten up, and importantly, what you should stop wasting time on. Presented by TechMetric, Tectonic is happening April 9th through 11th in Houston, Texas. Tickets are on sale now, and my listeners get $500 off standard pricing with code CONFESSIONS500. Go to techmetric.com/Tectonic. That's TEKTONIC, or tap the link in the show notes for more.
If you think about these things on the front end, you can set it up that says, hey, there's a morality clause, in this that says if this happens, you lose your vested shares, right?
I have an acquaintance who was in a technology startup, and they were doing really well, and they were growing rapidly. It was 3 partners, and one of the partners had a drinking problem, had a drinking habit, and he was, probably a functional alcoholic, right? But when he was inebriated, he would do really inappropriate stuff,
Yep.
and he did some really inappropriate stuff in public while drunk, and it hit the social medias, right?
Yep.
Uh, and that would have destroyed their company pretty quickly. But they had that type of agreement, and uh, press release within 48 hours. His employment's been, or his association with the company has been terminated. He's no longer a shareholder. He has no equity in the business, and they erased him from all online material. I mean, it's like he didn't exist,
Yep.
but that probably saved that company.
Yeah.
That they had that in place and they acted immediately. And that doesn't happen unless you've got that type of agreement in place.
Yep. And that's so. I mean, the what if game. I mean, you have to go way far down the rabbit hole in all aspects of the agreement. Like you said, when you're thinking about this stuff, because I mean, sure, you don't know what can happen tomorrow. Anything can happen, and people change. We're dynamic individuals. Our lives change. Our situations change. Our personalities change, and somebody can, like you said, somebody can wake up tomorrow and have a bad day and make a controversial tweet or X or Facebook
Mm-hmm.
post or whatever we want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a rippling impact on the entire organization. So, those are just things that, like you said, just have to really be thought about. And
So I think one last thing that we'll touch on, the I think you need to look at the document also as kind of a living, breathing document that needs to be revisited on a semi-regular basis.
Yep.
Just like an estate plan, what your estate plan is now versus 15 years from now, where you are in life, your financial standing, the needs of your family and children, all of that changes on a regular basis. What you think the business will look like when you're starting it versus what it looks like in 10 years typically are wildly different things, right? So it is reasonable to revisit those agreements as long as everybody agrees on any adjustments that are made, right? But having a rock solid partnership agreement and business agreement in place and put it in the safe is better than not having one at all.
Yep.
But have one and then revisit it every 3 years, I think, is reasonable. Whatever time frame is reasonable for you, and adjust it as needed. Like, two single individuals start a business and they both end up married, and that wasn't part of the agreement. You need to make that part of the agreement, right? You need to make those adjustments. You had no kids, now you have kids that you want to provide for. Make adjustments. The nature of the marketplace has changed. The nature of the business has changed. Maybe you started out as a detailing company and now you're an auto repair business. Maybe you started out as a diesel specialty and now you're full service. Things change, and so you need to be willing to revisit partnership agreements and make adjustments. So,
Yep. And, 100%. I would say one of the best things that I learned from my dad was really big on us having a family meeting, amongst him and the kids. Even if some of us, because not all of us were always active in the business, but we met twice a year, every year, and he would sit down and, we had a stakeholders meeting, and, we had conversations about, who was in the will, who was not in the will, what that looked like. And, based off of the business and what the trust looked like and all that kind of stuff. And it changed. I mean, it changed every single time we met. And sometimes it was voluntary change that where everybody was like, yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes you didn't get a say in it. It's just how he felt in the moment. It's what it was. But at least you knew, what was going on. And I would say anybody that has if you're filling out your articles of incorporation at the end of the year and you have a partner that you need to sign off on the articles of incorporation, you should meet at least twice a year and have some sort of a real, a real meeting of the minds of the structure of the business, the performance of the business, review the partnership and pull out that partnership agreement and remind yourself of what it was. Is it still valid? Right? Did you come up with more questions that you didn't even think about on the front end? Because that can happen too. What happens if you create an entity together as a one store location, that store is wildly successful, and the other partner wants to take his earnings that he's made off of that and go start location number 2, right? Mm-hmm. Is there any non-compete with who owns the licensing of the name? Because the entity can be owned 100% by one individual if there's an operating LLC and a licensing LLC, right? And those are things that need to be talked about, or what keeps them from starting another business in a completely different name, right? Have you set an area up that says, hey, no competing, but you can't invest in a competing business within 50 miles of this location or any location that we would create with this name.
Yeah.
All those things really need to be thought about and talked about. And you might not even be thinking about multiple locations when you first open up your one bay, bay 2-man operation. And then all of a sudden all your dreams come true and you have all this money, and now other options are available to you. You just really got to go through the checklist. If you don't know how to do this, reach out to us at Elite. We do have these checklists available. Like you said, your coach helped you go through that and gave you guys a lot to think about. So if you're entertaining the idea of a partnership and you're unsure, or you don't have support on this, reach out to us. At bare minimum, we can email you a checklist of things that you guys need to sit down and talk about that covers a lot about what we talked about today.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I think there's a lot of value there. Not the normal level of shenanigans and inappropriate jokes that I typically bring to the table, but maybe some actual value. I think that is an important conversation to be had. So that's good, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Remember Fly with the Eagles. What were those dates again? It's
May 14th through the 16th in Charlotte.
Okay.
This year.
EliteWorldwide.com/events. Use code confessions300. You'll get $300 off registration.
Yep.
Cool.
And we do cap those classes out at 60 attendees to make sure that everybody gets a little bit of one-on-one attention while we're there.
And y'all have been selling them out of late.
We have sold out the last 4. So if you're entertaining it, from a value standpoint, the normal price is $6.99. We have a discount code. I know that you alluded to, and we're going to get some of the information out on the Facebook page there with the registration link. But there's a heavy discount for the listeners. I can promise you, it's the best value in automotive training out there. No question about it.
3 days of training for $3.99 with that coupon code is crazy good.
Yeah, and I know it seems like a deal that's too good to be true. Why would there can't be that much value in a class for $399? We're upfront and honest about it. I mean, obviously, we have some selfish benefit of having people there because we would love an opportunity to share with you for 3 days and then turn that into a relationship after the fact. But it's not a sales course. We're not sitting there and there are some companies that use that as you get 1 hour of value and then 6 hours of beat over the head to sign up for their program.
ATI.
And that's not what our course is. We're trying to pack as much value into those 3 days as possible because our belief is if we can provide that value for you over the 3 days, that you're going to see the value in what you could get out of our services after that as well. And we had 65 attendees at the last one in Los Angeles. Out of the people in that room, so some of the other benefits that you get outside of just listening to myself and Tom and Joe talk for 3 days, and this through being in the peer group, the networking ability that you get from some of the other attendees is just as good, if not more valuable, than the training that we're going to give you standing up there and talking. There were 4 shop owners in that room that when we were going around and doing the P&L reviews, netted over $1 million at one location. So, to have 4 people in one room that are netting $1 million out of one store, that's rare. And I'm not saying we have that at every event, but how much would you pay to sit down in a room with somebody that was, that successful, that you got 3 days of access to be able to ask questions along with getting some outside training,
And I think it's worth noting that these are very finely tuned operators who are still coming to classes like this because there's always something to learn
and asking questions. And, and that's one thing. And you notice this too. The shop owners that are usually the best are the ones that go to training and act like they don't know anything. Those are usually the ones that when we sit down and take a look at the numbers, they're.
So you're saying when I go to training and act like I know everything, I'm surrounded by people who are sitting in the corner quiet.
You're really good at self-deprecation. I would put you in that category. I haven't seen you stand up and beat your chest in front of a group of people before, so I'll give you credit on that.
Oh man! All right. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to let you go, man. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you. Kids are starting to stir. I think it's about time to get ready for the beach.
Yeah. Well, you guys enjoy the beach and look forward to seeing you guys coming up at some of the events.
Awesome. See you, dude.
All right. See you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our video today. If you enjoyed this content and you'd like to see some more, you can click right here. And it would be really helpful for me if you thought that this level of mediocrity is something that could help your other friends that were shop owners or in the industry. You can click right here and subscribe. You can even set up notifications if you want. I'd love to have you on the channel.